Um, but yeah, so this thing, all it's got in it is a single ramjet, which is why it needed the SR-71 originally, because ramjets only work after a certain speed. So you basically needed to get this thing up to Mach 3 to run it, which is why they attached a rocket booster after they stopped using it on the SR-71. But
Jeez.
like I said, even when they got it flying right, it still didn't. They still couldn't get it to come back and land wherever we wanted it to, which is a real shame. But I mean, that's government experimental projects for you.
Yeah, more so during that period.
Oh yeah. But it's still a really fascinating piece of technology.
Absolutely,
And
like Mach 3 capable, and like
yeah.
the very concept of using drones or unmanned aircraft to do any kind of missions really by that time.
Oh yeah. Over here we have a wonderful A-10. I'm sure everyone recognizes this plane. It's pretty much probably one of the most famous aircraft you'll see anywhere these days. Uh, you can see it's 10 hard points, or 11 hard points, sorry. And it's a GAU 8. This aircraft is just one of my favorites, honestly. And despite what people will tell you, the Air Force believed in its ability to dogfight. May have been designed for attack, but they actually operating procedure for a number of years was that this would run. They could use this to run convoy protection at low speeds, especially from helicopters. At least that's what they said in the practice. We haven't really gone up against anyone we needed to test that theory out against. But, in practice, they figured if it's low speed dogfighting we need, the A-10 will do just fine. Which I guess makes sense with the straight wings and the powerful engines. But yeah, the A-10 is just such a unique aircraft. It's gorgeous.
It's a looker. Really.
Absolutely. Over here is an aircraft that I've never actually been able to see myself, and this is the TF the TF 10. Is it a 102 or 106? 102. So the F-102 it's known as the Delta Dagger, and normally you'd have just a single cockpit in there, a single seat, and it would be a lot smaller, and it was Mach 2 capable. This one here is a TF-102, so it actually installed a second seat side by side and made the cockpit wider.
Hello there.
And it's actually really cool to see one of these. You can find them in a few places across America, but it's such an interesting way of going about creating a trainer aircraft for supersonic speeds. And I always think it looks weird, but at the same time it looks pretty cool to me. Just an interesting way of going about that whole idea. Because basically we had a ton of F-102s and the production lines were already set up, and it's like, how do we train people for supersonic flights? How do we train them for these aircraft? Because they had begun to outpace the trainer aircraft at the time. So you got this interesting but weird design.
Yeah, that plane is one of those. It's one of those we were mentioning a bit with tech, like the early interceptor concept and how all the countries try to deal with that.
Yeah, so yeah, the F-102 was an early interceptor, and actually everything from about here back is your standard F-102, but everything here in the front has been pretty much completely modified. The intakes were moved down to the bottom rather than the side, and then you have the dual cockpit, and you got that big old pitot tube there.
Yeah,
But the original F-102 would carry 4 AIM-4 Falcons, no, 6 AIM-4 Falcons, and then 24 Mighty Mouse rockets if you wanted as well.
Well, the ones with the proximity thing.
Yeah, not with the proximity, just your standard.
Oh, yeah, the
impact
normal one. Oh, okay.
Yeah, but here's the piece de la resistance is the B-58 Hustler. This one is actually converted to a trainer in its later life. The B-58 is one of my favorite aircraft. I mean, it's probably is my favorite aircraft actually. There's a Mach 2 bomber in the 50s or 60s. I mean, what's not to love about it, right?
Yeah.
They actually, my favorite thing is they had a concept for this where they wanted to enlarge it by about 50% and then stick SR-71 engines on it. And even the Air Force is like, that might be a little
A
much.
little too much.
But I mean, it's just an impressive aircraft. You could run it without this pod underneath, but this pod would hold a bomb, and it would hold a bomb in the middle, and then you could have fuel in the front and back. I also saw a concept to make a pod where you could stick people in it for VIP transport. It would have like 6 people along in there, and it'd just be single row seating. And all I can think is, I don't know if I'd want to ride in that ride in that plane.
Yeah, I was mentioning that one because, as you probably have read about, these bombers usually gets bring up when they try to advocate for getting more bombers into War Thunder.
Oh
So
yeah.
if
This
you
is
could explain
a
a bit
pretty
of the
common
general concept of the Hustler.
requested aircraft in War Thunder. Does this one still have the Vulcan in the tail, or was that removed? So like we were talking about with the B-47 over there, this was the B-58 was designed with some defensive weaponry. It normally would have had a Vulcan in the tail, and that would be radar guided, and you would have the gunner up front, the weapons officer. It actually has 3 seats, so you have 2 right up here, and you'd have a third guy back here, and that's your weapons officer and your pilot and co-pilot / navigator, so on. And I showed off the ejection pod back there. This is actually how they tested it over here. We'll get to that in a minute. Here we have an F-100C, which is a gorgeous aircraft. I did some reading on this one, and I believe it was owned by the NACA, the National Aeronautics Committee. Wait, is it National? I can't remember the
National Committee for Aeronautics, I guess.
Yeah, it was something like that. The precursor to NASA, basically. This was actually used for studying inertial roll coupling, which is a huge problem with supersonic aircraft. When you start getting something going too fast, the inertia of the vehicle can overcome all of the control surfaces and wings, and it sort of just explodes your plane. It's sort of you lose all control of it at high Mach, which is not what you want to do.
Just a second before you continue through a Super Saver. Focal Lucifer asked about the Hustler. How does the front land gear work with that big tank thingy in the way?
So the front land gear, they actually, some guy at the Air Force Museum made a really cool sort of thing for it, but it's step over here. It actually it doesn't retract up like this, like you'd think. It actually retracts backwards. So this bit will retract that way, and then it pulls the gear up like this. So by the end of this part will be up here, while all of this gear right here will be back there, is the general idea. And that's how it gets around the tank. It's a really interesting design. I'm not
Yeah.
quite
Yeah.
sure why they didn't just make the tank a little shorter, but it's the kind of engineering you get out of the Cold War,
Right.
basically.
Well, there you go. Oh, someone said it's the National Advisory Committee for Aeronautics. There it is.
Yeah. The National Advisory Committee for Aeronautics. Yes, okay,
Yeah.
that I knew it
And
was something like that, but I just couldn't think of it off the top of my head.
the last one is if they have an F-101 Voodoo and an A5 Vigilante.
They don't have an A5, but you do have an F-101, right? Yeah, they have a Voodoo.
There you go then.
We'll
Okay,
get
you
to that
can
in a minute, I'm sure.
if you
Oh, I
wanna
see
you
it.
wanna continue with the Super Saver or
Uh,
with the other one.
I mean,
Oh,
the
that
Super Saber is, I mean, you know what it is. It's based off the Saber.
oh, Rokker. Yeah, did you catch it? Yeah, let's move him out and then. Hey, Rokker,
Over
can
here
you
we
hear us?
have the F-14 Tom. Yeah, can you
Rokker,
hear me?
Rokker. Okay, yeah, we're back online.
All right, cool. Um, so we have an F-14 over here, the Tomcat. Everyone's pretty much, if you grew up in the 90s, you're definitely familiar with this plane. Uh,
So it seems.
this the Tomcat was obviously in service from the 70s to the early 2000s. It was a carrier-based fighter. It was the air superiority fighter for the U.S. Navy for the longest time. You have your fuel tanks under here, and you could carry up to 6 AIM-4 Phoenixes, 2 on the wings and then 4 underneath. This is a B model, so it has the upgraded engines. The original one used the same engines as the F-111, but that ultimately was not. It ultimately came to hinder it because it couldn't get enough air into the engines, and you'd have a horrible compressor stall when you're coming in for landings on carriers. So eventually, the B model had to get a separate engine design to help deal with that. But it's an absolutely gorgeous aircraft, and anyone who's seen Top Gun is automatically a fan of that plane.
Yeah,
Uh,
it's
so over
it's
here,
undoubtedly a very cool plane. Like even if you can
oh,
have your proclivities or whatever being added to the game, but it's a looker. What can I
oh,
say?
absolutely. So this here is the B-58 rocket sled. It was used for testing those escape capsules we saw earlier. Um, that actually one of the funny things when they're testing those escape capsules is they would stick a bear in it to see if
No way.
living things would survive it. Yeah, they just drug up a bear, stick it in. You can find videos of it online. There's just a brown bear chilling in one of those seats.
Jesus.
Um, and so they would speed this up to Mach 2, and then they would eject out of the top there, and it's made to basically just replicate the conditions you'd be under when ejecting, because the ejection capsule concept hadn't really been tested before, so they needed a way to go through with that. And that's how they did it. And
Yeah.
this is one of a kind. There's none of these anywhere else in the world. This is one of the big must
Right.
sees of this museum. Absolutely. Um, if we come on over here, this is a Huey, your standard UH-1. Uh, everyone knows the Huey. Like I said earlier today, the Huey is
Yeah.
pretty iconic. Helicopter is used from the early '60s all the way down to
The
the Air
present,
Force.
pretty much.
Yeah, they're definitely used in the present. The Air Force just retired theirs 2 years ago, I think. So this thing was the Huey saw service up until very recently in the U.S. Military, and it still sees service worldwide.
Yeah, absolutely. The thing is gonna probably outlive us at this
Oh,
rate.
absolutely. The Hueys will be flying long after I'm dead. Is it possible to go up the tower? Or... if you're okay with that, absolutely. All right. So, thank you very much to Tommy's going to go get the key, and we're going to go up that tower, and that's the control tower for the base, the former control and guard tower, and it gives you a overlook of the whole museum. We need to make sure to thank him
Absolutely.
when he gets back, because he is really making this tour. He's the whole reason this tour is happening.
Yeah.
While I wait for him, I'm going to show off back here. We have a.
You also, guys, in the chat. In the meanwhile, if you have any questions or any comments,
feel free to ask. And if
sir.
I can't answer them, I'll ask him. But
Oh well, I think this one is for you or the good our Mr. Thomas. Is there any F-105 Thunder Chief?
I think I saw they have an F-105. Oh yeah, I see it. Yeah, they have one.
They
Get
have
to
one.
it.
Well, I tell you that Apocalypse is must be on a roll because every plane that he has asked for is on the museum.
Except for the what was it? The one.
Oh, that was another.
Oh, okay.
User.
So this is a TA4J. This is a trainer version of the A4 Skyhawk. We all know the Skyhawk. It was a wonderful attacker and decent fighter. This one has a shroud around the 20 millimeters, but you can see the 20 millimeters here, or where they would be. The A4 is actually still in service with a number of militaries these days.
Yeah, around the world. Yeah, absolutely.
Around the world. And this is what I was talking about earlier with the probe and drogue that the Navy uses. So the pilots for the Navy, they're in charge of flying the plane into the drogue, and that's this bit right here. The main reason for that separation, because the Air Force did use it initially, the main reason for that separation is the probe and drogue is typically easier, but it has a lower flow rate and it's harder for bomber pilots to use. So, because the Air Force is operating things like B-52s, they couldn't use the probe and drogue system easily. So the Air Force swapped over very early on to the
ones that we have grown to known from there.
Exactly. You can see here's the locking mechanism for the F-14. So you'd lock that into the catapult system and it would drag it away. You could fit your Phoenixes would go right into these dents right here. And you would have you could attach bomb loading or bomb holding mechanisms to these as well if you wanted to run ground ordnance. And here's where your M61 Vulcan, standard on any U.S. fighter, would go. It's not an American fighter if it doesn't have a Vulcan or a...
Shoot, goddamn, that weapon is a good one. I think this one is from a while ago, but it says on the Huey, what's with the spikes on the tail of the helicopter?
So those spikes, you'll actually see these on a lot of things throughout the museum. Those are just anti-nesting spikes. Because none of these planes are moving anymore, it's very easy for a bird to look at it and go, "Hey, that looks like a treetop. I'm gonna build a nest on it." You can actually maybe make them out right here on the tail of the helicopter as well, or not the tail, on the exhaust of the helicopter as well. Yeah, it's just a measure to keep birds from landing on it, pooping on it, building nests on it. But yeah. This here is their other refueling aircraft. They have two here. They have the KC-97 we already saw, and then they have this, which is a KC-135. This one was converted into a electronic warfare aircraft, so an EC-135. It is based off of the same plane as the 707 by Boeing, but it is a different aircraft. So this one was actually used for airborne command relaying. So it has a lot of radio equipment in it, and it would basically just relay radio messages between various aircraft. But it also does have its refueling probe in the back. If we come over here. So you have a starter engine over here. No, this isn't a starter engine. This is for filling up the liquid oxygen bottles for emergency uses. That's a big ol' icicle. Shoot. But if we come over here, you can see the refueling boom here, just like on the other one. So you can see how it is stowed. They just retract it all the way up and then lock it in place. And I've actually gotten to lay in the back of one of these. But yeah, so you'll just be peeking out the back there, checking everything out. It's interesting. The C-135 as a cargo aircraft saw use for maybe 5-10 years. The KC-135, actually the oldest aircraft in the U.S. inventory, the few of the oldest aircraft in the U.S. inventory, I think it's the first 5 oldest, are all KC-135s. They've been flying, I think the oldest serial number still flying in the Air Force is from 1957, and it's still operating today.
Yeah, even over here they acquired some. So it's going to be flying. One of those that is also going to be flying for a lot of time.
Yeah, everyone likes to talk about how the B-52 is going to fly for 100 years, but the KC-135 is going to have it beat. Thanks a lot for doing this.
They were mentioning that the force is still in service in countries like Brazil, Argentina, and Israel that only uses them as trainers.
What, the
The A4.
Yeah, the A4.
So here's another question. What does the museum do to keep the planes from rusting and or deteriorating from the elements over the years?
That's a good question for Tom. So the question is, what do you do for preventing... Oh, he's rusting? On the phone. I'll walk upstairs, and then when he's done,
Oh, in the meanwhile, I have noticed some people saying, which museum is this?
So this is the Grissom Air Museum. It's in northern Indiana in the town of Peru, near Grissom Air Reserve Base in Grissom Field. It is a wonderful stop if you're ever anywhere nearby. They have an amazing collection of aircraft.
Yeah, as usual also with that, now that we're mentioning, we'll post the links for the museum. And not only on the stream, but also when the video gets uploaded to YouTube eventually. So you guys can check it out and maybe collaborate with it.
Absolutely. That scared the hell out of me, I'm gonna be honest.
Jeez.
So here's the guard tower. It's a little windy up here, but I'll try and deal with that.
Mm.
So it's a little snowy right now, but this is the entirety of the museum. You see a wonderful collection of vehicles. We'll get over to some of, we still have, so this is what we've done so far. This is what we still have left. So we're about halfway.
A very impressive collection. Yes.
What was that?
A very impressive collection.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Yeah, like I said, Grissom Air Force Base was named after Gus Grissom, the second
astronaut.
the second Mercury astronaut, and the second Mercury astronaut and the first Gemini astronaut. He was also going to be the first one on an Apollo aircraft or Apollo spacecraft when Apollo 1 unfortunately had its incident, killing all 3 astronauts on board.
Yeah, the Apollo, the entirety of the Apollo projects. If you guys have the chance to watch a documentary or to read about it, it's really interesting. Like, really tells you about the spirit of the time.
So because he was from Indiana, they named a lot of things in Indiana after him. I think there's like 15, 20 schools named after him in Indiana. They got a military base named after him. And a few parks as well. But he is definitely well remembered.
Someone, well, the General Electric, that I think he was the one asking for the voodoo, spotted him over there, so that's good.
Yep, we're getting there. All right. So that's a great view up there.
It certainly is.
It's a little windy, but but they were asking what you do to preserve the aircraft.
Well, more of our work in the summer.
All right.
But we do some body repair. We also paint them. We try to put them on a paint schedule every 4 or 5 years.
All right.
The 102 is one that we've recently done.
Okay.
That's why there's no decals on it.
Mm-hmm.
We did the F11, which will come up here pretty soon. But
right.
We did about 4 or 5 aircraft this past summer, and we've got probably another 4 that we're going to do this summer as soon as the weather gets better.
All right.
But yeah, the 284J back here was one that we just painted.
Yeah, that looks
cool. We had all the decals for, so we were lucky there.
Okay.
And but we have the next ones that are going to be on the list to do is going to be the 119, the KC-97, and I want to say the F-14.
All right.
And then I think the Buckeye out front is the other one that's going to be done this year.
So in case you didn't catch that, I don't know if the mic picked up. Every summer they paint the aircraft, or they paint a few of the aircraft on a rotating 4 to 5 year schedule as needed for preservation, and they do some body work when needed. So here's the Huey that we already covered. Over here is one of my favorite light aircraft of all time. I have a lot of favorite aircraft, but this one, I love the pusher puller design on the O2 Skymaster. just an interesting little design. And actually, one of the cool things about this is it's a little civilian aircraft, but you could mount some light ordnance, namely 100-pound bombs, or usually some small Hydra rocket launchers, or you could use smoke rockets on them for marking targets, which was more common. But the O2 was a very important light reconnaissance aircraft in Vietnam, along with the O1. This would provide a lot of target directing, basically. And these actually took a lot of ground fire. Usually, is the big thing. You'll find a lot of these in museums that have holes and patches on them from various hits from usually AKs and whatever they're firing straight up in the air.